Felix Jennings didn't have time for hospitals, especially not at 9 in the morning on a Friday, but when his mother clutched his arm and insisted he take her himself, he canceled a multi-million-dollar investment meeting without a second thought. "Felix, I'm fine. I just want the doctor to check the blood pressure again. Stop hovering." His mother, Lorraine, said with a roll of her eyes as they walked through the sliding glass doors of the Los Angeles Medical Center. "You're not fine, Mom," Felix said, guiding her toward the reception desk. "You fainted last week. That's not something I ignore," Lorraine waved a dismissive hand. "I stood up too fast. You're too dramatic." Felix gave a tight smile to the woman at the front desk, who froze when she recognized him. He was used to that people staring. He was on the cover of Forbes last month, named Tech's most elusive billionaire for the third year in a row. "I've got her from here." A woman's voice cut through the room, soft but firm. Felix turned, and everything else stopped. She wore navy blue scrubs, her brown curls pulled into a messy bun that somehow still looked perfect. Her eyes were the color of dark roasted coffee, sharp and kind all at once. She had a clipboard in one hand and a quiet confidence in her stance that told him she ran the room, whether anyone realized it or not. "I'm Bianca," she said to Lorraine with a warm smile. "Let's get you checked in." Lorraine lit up. "Finally, someone competent," Bianca laughed. "I'll pretend that's a compliment." Felix stepped forward, holding out a hand. "Felix Jennings, I'd like to stay with her for the checkup." Bianca shook his hand, her grip firm. "We'll bring you in once the doctor finishes the initial vitals." "It won't be long." Felix opened his mouth to argue, but Bianca was already leading his mother down the corridor, her voice calm and reassuring. He stood there, stunned. What the hell just happened? He settled into the waiting area, tapping his foot restlessly. He wasn't used to feeling powerless. In the boardroom, he was the one giving orders, but here he was just another worried son. After 20 minutes that felt like an hour, Bianca returned. "Your mom's doing good. Doctor says her blood pressure's a little high, but nothing alarming. He'll go over the details with her shortly." Felix stood. "Can I see her?" Bianca looked at him, amused. "She's asking for you, actually. Said you'd be pacing like a panther by now." He followed her down the hall, and as they walked, he glanced at her. "How long have you worked here?" "6 years, she said. "Started as a student nurse, worked my way up." He nodded. "You're good at what you do." She looked at him, surprised. "Thanks, most people don't notice the nurse. They only care about the doctor. I notice people who take care of the ones I love." Bianca's cheeks flushed, and she cleared her throat, stopping outside the room. "She's in here." Before he could say more, she was gone. After the appointment, Lorraine was beaming. "I like her," she said as Felix helped her into the back of his black Bentley. "You should ask her out." Felix laughed. "Mom, she's a nurse. I don't think she's looking to date a billionaire." Lorraine arched a brow. "She doesn't even know who you are. She called you Felix, like you're some guy in a flannel who fixes cars." Felix smirked. "Maybe I like that." He couldn't stop thinking about her the whole drive home. The next morning, he showed up at the hospital again, this time with a bouquet of yellow tulips. Bianca was at the nurse's station, typing notes into a chart. When she looked up and saw him, she blinked. "You're back." "I brought flowers," he said simply, holding them out. "For me?" "No," he deadpanned. "For the vending machine." She laughed, taking the bouquet. "You know this is wildly inappropriate, right? You can't just show up at someone's workplace with flowers." "Says who?" She looked at him, clearly trying not to smile. "I wanted to thank you," he added, "for taking care of my mom and for being honest with me. Most people aren't." Bianca's smile faded a little and she set the flowers down. "Look, Felix, you seem nice, but I don't give guys like me the time of day," he finished. "No," she said, crossing her arms. "I don't date patients' family members. Or men who think they can charm their way into anything." He stepped closer. "I'm not trying to charm you, I'm trying to get to know you." Bianca hesitated. He could see the wall she was trying to keep up. "I get it," he said quietly. "You're careful, you've built something here. You don't want anyone coming in and turning it upside down." Her eyes flicked to his. "Exactly. I won't. But I'll be honest, I want to see you again, outside of this place. 1 hour, coffee, no pressure." She studied him for a long beat, then sighed. "Fine, 1 hour," Felix grinned. "I'll pick you up tomorrow." "No," she said quickly. "I'll meet you at Luna's on Melrose, 10 a.m. He raised his hands. "Deal." The next morning, Bianca was already waiting at Luna's when he arrived, black jeans, white blouse, hair down. Felix was wearing a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled up, Rolex peeking from his wrist. "You clean up nice," she said as he sat down. He grinned. "You're not so bad yourself." She raised an eyebrow. "So what do you actually do?" "Besides bringing flowers to nurses you barely know. I run a company, tech. We design AI that helps disaster relief teams coordinate faster." She blinked. "Wow, that's cool." He sipped his coffee. "It's more spreadsheets than cool, but yeah, I like it." They talked for an hour, then 2. Then 3. She told him about growing up in a small town in Oregon, about paying her way through nursing school, about how she used to think Los Angeles was too big, too loud. He told her about being raised by a single mom who worked double shifts to keep them afloat, about building his company from a garage in Echo Park, about losing friends along the way because success made people weird. By the time they stood to leave, something had shifted. He didn't want the date to end. "I want to take you to dinner," he said. Bianca hesitated. "Felix, let me show you the other part of my world." She looked up at him, unsure. Then finally, "Okay, one dinner." He smiled. And for the first time in a long time, the billionaire who had everything felt like he was finally chasing something real. The valet opened the door to the vintage black Aston Martin as Bianca stepped onto the curb, her heels clicking against the stone entrance of the rooftop restaurant. The air was crisp, the city glittering below like a bed of stars caught in motion. She hadn't expected Felix to choose someplace like this, intimate, elegant, and nestled high above the noise. It felt like something out of a dream she wasn't sure she belonged in. "Good evening," he said as he approached, offering his arm. He wore a tailored charcoal suit, no tie, the first 2 buttons of his shirt undone, revealing just a hint of skin and a silver chain that caught the light. "You look like you belong in a place that charges 3 figures for a salad." Bianca slid her fingers through the crook of his arm. "And you look like you own the place." "I don't," he said. Yet, they were seated on the far end of the terrace beneath a canopy of hanging lights and white wisteria. A soft jazz quartet played near the bar, their melody floating on the breeze. Felix didn't open the menu, he didn't need to. The chef himself came out to greet him, and after a few quiet words exchanged in French, dinner was underway without either of them lifting a finger. As the first course arrived, crab croquettes with saffron aioli, Bianca looked around, her expression unreadable. "You've done this before," she said. Dinners like this. The kind where the chef greets you like family and no one asks you what kind of water you want because they already know." He leaned back slightly. "Is that a problem?" "No," she said. "Just new." Felix let the silence settle for a beat before he spoke again. "What did you expect tonight to be?" "I didn't expect to feel like I stepped into a movie," she said. "But I guess that's what happens when you say yes to a man who drives a car older than your parents." He laughed, a sound low and genuine. "I wanted to show you something different. Not to impress you, just so you'd know what my life looks like outside the hospital walls. And what if I told you my idea of a good night is a diner with plastic menus and pancakes at midnight? Then I'd ask you to pick the place for our next date." Bianca tilted her head. "So this is a date, I hope so." She picked up her wineglass, swirling the deep red liquid before taking a small sip. "Then I guess I should warn you, I don't do casual." "Neither do I." She studied him carefully, as if waiting for the catch, but the night went on without one. By the time dessert arrived, a delicate honey panna cotta with lavender cream, the tension between them had shifted. It wasn't uncertainty anymore, it was anticipation. "You never told me why you really came back to the hospital," she said. "I told you. To thank you. No one drives across town and waits 30 minutes in a hospital lobby just to say thanks." He didn't look away. "I wanted to see you again. I didn't know how else to make that happen." Bianca set her spoon down. "You could have just asked. I didn't think you'd say yes. Then you don't know me very well." Felix stood, holding out a hand. "Let me walk you to your car." She took his hand, her fingers cool against his warmth. They didn't speak as they descended the elevator, or as the valet pulled up her car, a modest gray sedan that looked like it had seen more practical days than glamorous ones. "Do you want to come by my place next time?" he asked. She raised a brow. "Are you inviting me to your penthouse?" I'm inviting you to a rooftop garden with a view of the ocean and pizza. Real pizza, not the kind with truffle oil. Bianca stepped closer, her eyes locked with his. I work long hours, I don't do last-minute plans. And I definitely don't clear my calendar for anyone. Then tell me when you're free. She hesitated only a second. Thursday, I'm off at 7. Don't be late. She got into her car and drove off without another word, but her smile lingered in his mind long after the taillights disappeared. Thursday came fast, and Felix was ready. He spent the afternoon overseeing the setup on the rooftop of his Venice Beach property. String lights were hung between the pergolas. 2 lounge chairs faced the horizon, the sky already streaked with gold. A pizza oven had been installed months ago for events he never hosted. Tonight, it served its first true purpose. When Bianca arrived, she wore jeans and a white t-shirt, her curls loose and wind-tossed. She looked around, blinking. You weren't kidding, she said. You really live here. I do, he said. But tonight this is just a rooftop with 2 people and a margarita pizza. She walked to the edge, looking out over the ocean. I've lived in this city 6 years and never seen it from this angle. He handed her a plate. Then it's about time. They ate in silence for a few minutes, the waves crashing softly below. Finally, Bianca set her plate down. Why me? Felix didn't pretend not to understand. Because you don't care about any of this. She turned to face him. That's not a reason. You challenge me, he said. You're not impressed by money or power. You don't laugh at my jokes unless they're actually funny. You're honest, and not the kind that cuts to be clever, the kind that holds people together. Bianca said nothing for a moment. Then, you're used to people giving you what you want, true. And I'm not going to do that. I'm counting on it. She looked away out at the water. I need to tell you something. Before this goes any further, he waited. My dad was a cardiologist. The kind who wore cufflinks to Sunday brunch and had a framed photo of his awards in the living room. He left when I was 15, married his receptionist. My mom and I had to sell the house and move into a 2-bedroom apartment above a mechanic shop. I put myself through school because I didn't want to owe anyone anything ever again. Felix's voice was quiet. That's why you don't let people in. That's why I don't trust people who live on rooftops and show up with flowers. I'm not your father, I know, she said. But I'm still scared you'll disappear the second you get bored. He stepped closer, his expression unreadable. What if I'm scared too? She looked at him, surprised. Of what? Of finally meeting someone who sees me, not the company, not the lifestyle, just me. Bianca took a step forward. Then I guess we're both scared. He didn't kiss her. Not yet. But his hand brushed hers and she didn't pull away. They stood like that until the sun dipped below the horizon, the last light clinging to the edge of the sky. The next morning, Bianca returned to the hospital, her heart still somewhere on that rooftop. And Felix found himself staring at the same spreadsheet for nearly an hour, distracted by the ghost of her laughter in his head. Neither of them said it aloud, but something had changed. And neither of them wanted to go back. Felix stood at the edge of the hotel ballroom, jaw clenched, hands buried in the pockets of his navy suit. The event was a fundraiser for pediatric research, hosted by one of the investment boards he sat on. Normally, he'd have been front and center, shaking hands with politicians, tossing back champagne with venture capitalists. But tonight, none of it mattered. Bianca hadn't answered his last message. He hadn't sent anything dramatic, just a simple check in the day after the rooftop. She'd responded briefly, said she was working doubles, then nothing since. That had been 5 days ago. He hated the silence more than he liked to admit. Jennings, came a voice from his left. You're hard to pin down these days. Felix turned. It was Thomas Whitaker, a legacy investor who liked to pretend the world still ran on country clubs and handshakes. Felix nodded but said nothing. You should have brought someone tonight, Thomas continued. These events are crawling with socialites. You do well to lock one down before the tabloids start assuming things. Felix's eyes flicked over the crowd. I'm not in the market for assumptions, Thomas chuckled. Still chasing that nurse? Felix's shoulders stiffened. Didn't realize you kept tabs on my personal life. Los Angeles isn't that big, word gets around. Felix didn't respond. He was already done with the conversation. He left the ballroom 10 minutes later, his tie loosened and his patience thinner than usual. The driver waited at the curb with the Rolls-Royce. Felix slid into the backseat, then paused. "Not home," he said. "Take me to the hospital." The driver didn't question him. When they pulled up to the entrance, Felix spotted her immediately through the glass doors. She was walking toward the exit, a worn backpack slung over one shoulder, her hair pulled into a braid that trailed down her back. He got out before the car even stopped. "Bianca." She froze, keys in hand. "What are you doing here? I wanted to see you." Her eyes scanned his suit, the cufflinks, the polished shoes. "You were at a gala." "I left early." She looked down at her watch. "It's past midnight." "I know," Bianca exhaled. "Felix, I told you I've been working. I'm not here to accuse you of anything." He stepped closer. "I'm here because I've thought about you every day since that night, and I don't like this distance." Her expression softened but didn't melt. "It's not just about time. Or work. I figured." Bianca looked around, then jerked her head toward the bench near the ambulance bay. They sat, the only sound the distant hum of the emergency generator and the occasional siren far off down the avenue. "I've been engaged before," she said suddenly. 5 years ago, Felix's brow furrowed. He was a resident, charming, brilliant, everyone loved him. I didn't realize until too late that he loved being admired more than he loved me. Felix stayed quiet. He cheated, repeatedly. And when I confronted him, he said I was lucky a man like him even noticed someone like me. Felix's voice was low. He was wrong. Bianca's eyes didn't lift from her hands. "I hear your name in the same conversations as people like him. Men who think success makes them untouchable. I'm not like them. I want to believe that." "Then let me show you," he said. "Not with rooftop dinners or cars that cost more than apartments, with consistency, with patience." Bianca looked at him, really looked. "You're not used to waiting for anything." "I'd wait for you." The words weren't rehearsed. They came from somewhere deeper than charm. She stood. "I have tomorrow off." He rose too. "Let me take you somewhere. No suits, no chauffeurs, somewhere real." He nodded. "I'll pick you up at 9. "No," she said. "I'll come to you. I want to see what your version of real looks like when no one's watching." The next morning, Felix opened the door to his Venice home barefoot, in dark jeans and a navy Henley, a coffee mug in hand. Bianca stood on the stoop in a hoodie and leggings, a backpack slung over her shoulder. She looked past him into the airy, sunlit space. "You live like someone who doesn't sleep." He stepped aside to let her in. "Doesn't happen often." The walls were lined with framed photos, none of them glossy magazine features or business awards. Just snapshots of him and Lorraine on vacations with their old dog at backyard barbecues. Bianca studied one. "You were chubby." He grinned. "I liked peanut butter sandwiches. I like that you didn't hide these." "Why would I? Most men with your kind of money try to act like they were born in a penthouse." "I wasn't," he said. "I was born in a 2-bedroom apartment above a bakery in Boyle Heights." Bianca set her backpack down. "What are we doing today?" "I thought I'd show you what I do when I'm not at galas or in boardrooms." He led her to a room in the back, a studio filled with sketches, whiteboards, and prototype tech. At the center was a sleek device, no bigger than a toaster, with LED indicators and a speaker grill. "This is the side link," he said. "It coordinates communication between emergency responders in disaster zones. Think earthquakes, wildfires, hurricanes. It creates a mesh network when everything else fails." Bianca walked around the device, brow furrowed. "You built this with a team." "But yeah, the first version was basically a hacked walkie-talkie and a Raspberry Pi." She looked at him in a way she hadn't before. "Why this?" "Because when I was 14, a fire broke out in our building. My mom was asleep. I called emergency services, but the lines were jammed. It took them 37 minutes to get to us." Bianca's voice was quieter now. "You never told me that. I don't tell many people." They left the house around noon. Felix took her to a small community center downtown where he sometimes funded coding workshops for underserved teens. He didn't introduce himself. Just sat in the back while Bianca observed the kids laughing, typing, problem-solving. Afterward, they picked up carne asada tacos from a truck with peeling paint and sat on the hood of his car to eat. "You're not what I expected," she said. "And what did you expect? Someone who'd get bored once things weren't shiny." He tossed a napkin into the bag. "I'm not looking for shiny, I'm looking for real." She leaned back against the windshield, the afternoon sun warm against her skin. You're not easy, you're intense, deliberate. You make things happen. Is that a complaint? It's a warning, she said. I'm not the kind of woman who fits into a lifestyle, I have my own. Then I'll find a way to make room. She looked at him and nodded just once. Okay. They drove back to his place in silence, the kind that didn't need filling. As she gathered her things to leave, she turned at the door. I'm not promising anything. I'm not asking for promises, Felix said. Just time. She gave him a look that was harder to read than any spreadsheet he'd ever tackled. Then she left. And Felix stood there, knowing something had shifted again, not with flowers or grand speeches, but with truth, and it felt more dangerous than any deal he'd ever signed. The knock on Lorraine's front door came just after 9 in the morning, and when she opened it, her eyebrows lifted as she saw Bianca no scrubs today. Just a soft, oatmeal-colored sweater, black jeans, and an expression that couldn't quite hide its nerves. Well, this is a surprise, Lorraine said, stepping back to let her in. Felix isn't here. I know, Bianca said, her voice steady but eyes searching. I came to see you. Lorraine tilted her head and then offered a small smile. Then you must be serious. They sat on the floral love seat in the living room, a teacup already steaming in front of Lorraine, the scent of chamomile drifting in the air. I wanted to ask you something, Bianca said, clasping her hands together. Not as his mother, but as someone who knows him better than anyone else. You want to know if he's for real, Lorraine said, not unkindly. Bianca nodded. I've built a life I'm proud of, and I'm not afraid to be alone, but he's different. He makes everything feel bigger. And I need to know if he means what he says when no one's watching. Lorraine reached over, setting her teacup down gently. I raised my son to keep his promises, even the ones that scare him, especially those. What he feels for you, it's not a passing thing. I haven't seen him look at someone like that since his father. Bianca blinked. You never talk about him. Lorraine's smile thinned. There's not much to say. He left before Felix could remember the sound of his voice, but that boy, he never let it break him. He built himself into someone who protects what he loves, even when it costs him. So if he's told you he's all in, then believe him, or don't, but don't doubt his heart. Bianca sat back, absorbing the words. Then quietly, thank you. Later that evening, Felix stood inside his office, pacing beneath the skylight as the final rays of daylight slanted across the concrete floor. He hadn't been able to focus all day. The numbers on his screen blurred. The calls with his executive team felt mechanical. And every time he reached for his phone to call her, he stopped. Then the elevator dinged. He turned as Bianca stepped out, her hair damp from the misty rain outside, her eyes searching his face. You came here, he said, his voice low. I needed to see where you think, she said. Where you disappear to when you're planning the future. He gestured toward the long glass table scattered with blueprints, data reports, and scribbled notes. This is the place, he said. Where I try to figure out how to fix things no one else wants to touch. She walked toward one of the boards, her gaze trailing over the sketches. You don't just build tech, you build answers. Felix watched her. Sometimes I wonder if I'm just trying to solve things so I don't have to feel them. Bianca turned to him. You feel everything, you just don't let anyone see it. He stepped closer, his voice rougher now. I'm not used to someone getting under my skin like this. You make me want things I haven't let myself want in years. She didn't move. Then tell me what you want. He reached up, cupping her face, his thumb brushing the edge of her cheekbone. I want you in my life, in my future. Not as some passing chapter, but as the part I rewrite everything for. Bianca's eyes didn't leave his. Then stop waiting for me to come to you. Show me I'm already there. The kiss, when it came, wasn't tentative. It was the kind that came after walls had been stripped, after questions had been answered. Hands tangled in hair. Breath caught between lips. And when they broke apart, the world had shifted again, but this time it felt like it had settled into place. In the following weeks, everything moved forward, but not in the way Felix was used to. There were no instant takeovers, no fast-tracked decisions. Bianca didn't move in. She didn't trade her world for his. Instead, they met in the middle. He picked her up after long shifts, sometimes bringing her dinner in a brown bag instead of a reservation at a rooftop. She taught him how to cook scrambled eggs just right and laughed when he burned toast twice in a row. They argued, too, about time, about pace, about what it meant to share a life without losing yourself in someone else's. And then one Sunday morning, as they sat on her small couch in her apartment, Felix barefoot, Bianca curled up with her knees under her chin, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a velvet box. "I know we're not traditional," he said, "and I know you don't need a ring to know I'm committed. But I need to ask you something anyway." She stared at the box but didn't open it. "I'm building a new research wing at the Children's Hospital," he said. "I want to name it after you." Her eyes widened. "Me, not to display your name," he said, "but to honor what you do every day. Without applause, without headlines, you've changed more lives than I'll ever know, including mine." Bianca's voice was barely above a whisper. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," he said. "Not just to the wing, to everything, the life, the mess, the parts we haven't figured out." "Marry me," she laughed, a sound soaked in disbelief and wonder. "You're not supposed to pitch a proposal like a business plan." "I'm not pitching," he said. "I'm begging." She took the box, opened it slowly. Inside was a ring that didn't scream wealth, it whispered intention. A single emerald set in a delicate gold band. He watched her, every second stretched tight. Finally, she looked up. "I'll marry you," she said, "but only if I get to keep my apartment for when I need to be alone." He let out a breath, the kind that carried months of hope and fear. Deal? The wedding wasn't a spectacle. It was held in a botanical garden just outside the city, with only 30 guests, friends, family, and colleagues who had seen them become something neither of them expected. Lorraine cried through the entire ceremony, dabbing her eyes with a silk handkerchief embroidered with Felix's childhood nickname. When Bianca walked down the aisle, there were no chandeliers or fountains. Just the scent of jasmine, the sound of wind through leaves, and the look on Felix's face as he saw her in a simple ivory dress that moved like breath. They wrote their own vows. He promised to never stop listening, even when he didn't understand. She promised to never shrink herself to fit into someone else's life. He vowed to build a future that honored their differences. She vowed to let him in, even on the days when the past tried to shut the door. When they kissed, the applause was quiet, reverent, like everyone knew they'd just witnessed the kind of love that didn't start with fireworks, but with a hospital hallway and a woman who didn't care who he was. Later that night, as they stood on the balcony of their hotel suite, looking out over the coastline, Felix wrapped his arms around her from behind. "You know," he murmured, "I never thought a checkup would change my life." Bianca leaned back against his chest. "I never thought a billionaire would make me feel safe." He kissed the top of her head. "You didn't just steal my heart, you rebuilt it." She turned to face him. "Then let's spend the rest of our lives making sure it never forgets where it belongs." And as the waves crashed below and the stars blinked into view, they held each other tighter, sure, finally, that they had found something rare. A love that wasn't just unexpected. It was exactly what they were both meant to find. The morning sun filtered through the gauzy curtains of the beach house, casting golden lines across the hardwood floor. Felix lay with one arm draped around Bianca, her head on his chest, the rhythm of her breathing soft and steady. Outside, the tide whispered against the sand, and inside, for the first time in his life, everything felt still. "I can hear you thinking," Bianca said without opening her eyes. Felix smiled faintly. "I was just trying to figure out how I got this lucky." She lifted her head, her curls tousled from sleep. "You didn't get lucky, you showed up, you stayed." He touched her cheek, brushing a stray hair behind her ear. "So did you?" They got out of bed slowly, reluctantly, as if afraid movement would dissolve the peace between them. But it didn't. It followed them into the kitchen, where Bianca made coffee with the familiarity of someone who belonged there. The routine felt lived in now, her pouring the water, him grabbing 2 mugs from the top shelf without asking. No awkwardness. No hesitation. Felix's phone buzzed on the counter and he ignored it. "You can take it," Bianca said, stirring milk into her cup. "I don't want to," he replied. "It's probably about the merger, or the foundation gala, or a property in Singapore I forgot I even own." She narrowed her eyes. "You forget you own properties. There are a lot of them." Bianca shook her head. "You're absurd." He leaned against the counter, watching her. I've been offered a seat on the International Board for the Global Health Initiative. It's mostly symbolic, but they want me to do a keynote speech in Geneva next month. Her brows rose. That's huge. It is, he said, but I'm not sure I want to go. She set her cup down. Why not? Because I don't want to turn into someone who's always chasing the next stage just because it's there. I built everything so I could have a life that meant something, and now I have that. Bianca folded her arms. You can still do meaningful things. You just have to choose which ones actually matter. He took a breath. Would you come with me to Geneva, to wherever this road takes us next? Bianca didn't answer right away. She walked to the window, staring out at the beach. Are you asking me to follow you? I'm asking you to walk beside me, he said, and I'll follow you when it's your turn. She turned back to him. Then yes. Later that week, Felix surprised Bianca with a small gathering at the hospital. He had arranged for the new pediatric wing to be unveiled early quietly, without media, without fanfare. Just the staff, a few patients, and her. When she stepped into the main hallway and saw her name above the entrance, the Bianca Ray's Children's Center, her knees nearly buckled. You're insane, she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. Felix slipped an arm around her waist. Only for you. Dr. Maida, one of Bianca's longtime colleagues, approached with a knowing smile. You always said you didn't want attention. Bianca laughed through her tears. I still don't. But you deserve it, Felix said. The patients gifted her a mural made of handprints, each one painted in bright colors with the child's name underneath. It was the kind of tribute that didn't need a press release. It spoke for itself. Bianca hugged each of the children, crouched beside their wheelchairs, listened to their stories. Felix watched from a few steps away, heart thudding at the sight of her in her element, strong, compassionate, luminous. That night back home, they curled up on the couch beneath a thick throw blanket. Bianca rested her head on Felix's lap, flipping through a book while he absent-mindedly played with a strand of her hair. I've been thinking, she said. That's dangerous. She nudged him with her elbow. What if we did something crazy? Define crazy. Take a year off. Travel, volunteer. Work in clinics around the world. You've got all these connections. We could actually do something tangible together. He blinked. You want to take a sabbatical? I want to live, she said. Not just exist between shifts and meetings. We finally have the freedom to choose what our life looks like. Felix didn't hesitate. Let's do it. Bianca sat up. Really? I've spent years building things, buildings, systems, empires, but the only thing I want to build now is a life with you. A messy, beautiful, unpredictable life. She kissed him softly, lingering a moment longer than usual. Then let's start planning. Over the next few weeks, they did exactly that. They sold the beach house and kept only the Venice rooftop as their home base. Bianca resigned from her hospital position with the understanding that she'd return in some capacity. Felix appointed a new CEO to oversee daily operations of his company, stepping back into a chairman role with limited responsibilities. The board protested, but he didn't flinch. They began mapping out a year of service and adventure, a mobile medical clinic in Kenya, rebuilding storm shelters in the Philippines, teaching tech literacy in underserved villages in Peru. Every plan revolved around impact, not image. One evening, as they sat on the rooftop under a sky full of stars, Bianca leaned against him, a map spread across her lap and a notebook full of dates and scribbled contacts. We leave in 3 weeks, she said. Are you ready? Felix looked at her, his hand resting on the small of her back. I've never been more ready. She closed the notebook, tucking it under her arm. It still feels surreal. That we're doing this. That I said yes to a man I once threatened to report for inappropriate flower deliveries. He laughed. You almost did too. I don't regret it. I don't either. They sat in silence for a while, the kind that filled the space with something deeper than words. Eventually, Bianca spoke again. Do you think people like us ever really slow down? I don't want to slow down, Felix said. I just want to move in the right direction. With you, she looked up at him. You always say the right thing. No, he whispered. I just finally found the right person to say it to. They kissed then, not like the first time, not like the last time, but like every time they would from that moment forward, with intention, with truth, with the kind of love that didn't ask for guarantees because it didn't need them. 2 years later, they returned to Los Angeles. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to. The rooftop still stood, but now it was filled with plants Bianca had collected from their travels. The walls of their home were lined with photos not of galas or awards, but of people they'd met, places they'd helped, lives they'd touched. Bianca joined the hospital again, this time as director of community outreach. Felix turned one of his properties into a tech incubator for young women in STEM. They still traveled, but now it was for conferences they spoke at together or short trips to check on projects they'd helped fund. They never needed the spotlight, they just needed each other. On a quiet Sunday morning, Felix brought Bianca breakfast in bed fresh croissants, cherries, and 2 mugs of coffee. She was wrapped in a robe, her hair still damp, and her smile was the same one that had stopped him in his tracks that very first day at the hospital. He sat beside her, balancing the tray on the bed. "I have one more surprise," he said. She narrowed her eyes. "If it's a yacht, I'm going to throw it back into the ocean." "It's not a yacht." He pulled a small envelope from his pocket and handed it to her. Inside was a photograph, grainy, black and white, taken just the day before. Bianca stared at it for a long moment, her fingers trembling. "You're serious," she whispered. Felix nodded, his voice thick. "We're going to be parents." Tears filled her eyes and she threw her arms around him, laughing and crying at once. They had built empires, they had changed lives, but this was the beginning of their greatest adventure yet, and they were ready, together, always.